So yes, road trip, accessibility at events. Now about me, every GA-Conf I have a slide, and it's evolved from I've done stuff. Oh, is that you, God? From I've done stuff to I've done more stuff, and since then I've only continued to do stuff. Long, short version, I've been in the game industry for over 10 years now, and for about 8 of it, I've been working in accessibility. I'm co-director of GA-Conf with Ian, and fun fact, if you look at the speaker lineup, you'll notice that every picture of me as a speaker is the same, but Ian has just photoshopped my hair to be the current hair color. We will continue this tradition. We'll see what it looks like for next GA-Conf EU. Before I get into my presentation, I want to talk about something that's actually not about my presentation. We're all here and we are advocating, and I know when you guys leave here, you're gonna go back and you're gonna advocate within your studios for accessibility. But one of the things I wanna tell you guys is it's also really important to advocate with your players for accessibility, because gamers want to be able to play games with other gamers. And when they understand accessibility, they'll start championing for it as well. So one example of this is Shara. So Shara is Shane and Tara, Shara. And we do a lot of accessibility advocating, live streaming, and really trying to work with just gamers so they understand. You'll also notice that Shara is a sponsor and has been a sponsor of every GA-Conf. And how Shane and I get the money to be a sponsor is we live stream and fundraise with just everyday gamers. And so the Shara sponsor is everyday gamers sponsoring this conference. So right now I have a slide up with a whole bunch of names that I'm not gonna read through, but each and every one of these guys donated to us so that we could sponsor the Game Accessibility Conference. So remember, when you leave here, your work doesn't just stop in your studio, you've gotta also do that work with your fans. So what am I actually gonna be talking about today? I'm gonna be talking about conventions, demo spaces, any of that sort of stuff. I'm going to talk literally from the beginning of getting into your events, how to make sure everyone has a great time at the event, how to put on awesome shows, but also prepping your staff. And one of the reasons I want to go into this is we talk a lot about how games are more than just entertainment. They're a part of our culture. They're a way to socialize. They're a means of escape. And when you get deeply involved in that culture, you know that it doesn't stop at your PC, at your console, right? You take that with you other places. And a huge thing for gamers are events. And it's an area that we are many times excluding gamers with disabilities from. Not on purpose, mostly because we don't think about it. And if we really want gaming to be inclusive, we need to not only make our products accessible, but we need to make every aspect of it accessible. Not just our marketing, not just our in-game options, literally the physical space you have when you go to an event. And I love this quote from Katie Jo Wright. She's the Gaming for Everyone director at Xbox. If you do not intentionally include, you will unintentionally exclude. And that is what happens with our physical gaming spaces. And so you need to think and plan and intentionally include these people. So attending events. I don't know if you've noticed, they're overwhelming for everyone. It's like, geez, it's a lot. And if you think it's a lot for a person without a disability, imagine what it's like for persons with disabilities. It's a literal minefield. It's a shit show. It's not a great experience in most cases. That's not great. You know, even here in just these 4 pictures, there are inaccessible things happening in every section. So one of the pictures has a standing only demo. Another one, which is Mixer, I'll call us out, we had some super plush carpet. That's terrible for wheelchair users. That's essentially molasses. There was Fallout, which had an elevated play space. And so much, there's not any line management or line cues. Like, it's insane. So, I know you guys want to do better. Obviously, you've at least come here, which is a great first step. But leaving here, you're going to go and you're going to make an event. Or maybe you won't be there personally, but you'll go tell someone. I know a lot of people here are probably not marketers setting up events, but you can advocate. So, you've decided to go. What's next? You literally have to start at registration for your event when you're inviting these people to come into your space to share your creation with them. So, why is registration so important? Number one, it gives you the ability for people with disabilities to self-identify themselves and their needs. And when you know what they need, you can plan and prepare for it. There's a reason we asked if people have allergies, because then we know what to take away if the caterer brings the wrong food, right? We can help prepare when we know. And so giving people that option is incredibly important. But it also sends the message, you literally thought someone may need something special. Literally providing that option shows that you have thought about it some. And of course, make sure you have an accessible way to register for your event. Most of you guys probably aren't making your own portal or whatever, but if you do, make sure, if you're using something that's already well known, like Eventbrite, they're gonna be handling that load for you, but just something else to keep in mind. Now, the other thing coming at registration, so we need to talk about medical passes. That's right, we have a Lilu Dallas multi-pass GIF on the screen. So medical passes. Basically, a medical pass is something that you give to someone who will be going with another person to assist them in whatever they need. It could be that they will help them if they're tired. It could be that they're carrying important medication. It could be they're there if they have some sort of attack or reaction. There are many reasons that someone may need someone to assist them or be with them. And a medical pass is a way to do that. Now, what's really important about a medical pass is not only should you be offering them, you should not charge for these. If you are charging for a medical pass, you are going to price people out of an event because the cost of going is already going to be expensive. And then literally, so someone can attend without the risk of dying, you're going to charge them again. No, don't do that. There have been companies and events that have tried to do this, and they were met with extreme backlash for just that reason. Another great thing is you should also allow people who have already purchased a badge to somehow denote a medical badge as well. So I've seen in a lot of cases, there'll be two friends, and they both purchased tickets to the event already. Second person was like, oh, I need a medical badge. Just let them upgrade their pass or whatever. And be sure to offer a separate pickup line. One of the things that's terrible about badge pickup is the lines. And for someone who can't stand for a long time or need extra assistance, if you make them wait in the normal line to get their badge, it's not going to work out. So if someone is denoted they need a medical badge, please give them a space where they can pick it up in an accessible way for them. And after badge pickup, there's security. And not all security is going to work for everyone. You have to be thoughtful. So I have a picture right now of Wolverine going through a metal detector and obviously not working well. The system they set up would work for a lot of people. It's not going to work for Wolverine. The same can be said with accessibility. So this real life example, I was at an event with one of my friends who uses a wheelchair, but also had a bag on his wheelchair, and inside it, he had oxygen tanks. There was a no bags rule at this event. We go through security, and security stops him. Can't bring a bag in. He's like, it's got oxygen tanks in it. Security's like, no bags. And he's like, I literally can't breathe. Can I please bring in the bag? This went on for 10 minutes before they finally allowed him to come in with his bag, which again contained oxygen tanks. So remember, when you're making security or secure entrances, that you have to remember there are going to be people who are going to need to be exceptions for the rule. Be prepared. All right, so we've gotten registered, we've gotten through security, and we are so ready for your event now. We have made it to the building. But convention spaces are a whole other set of issues. I mean, they're busy, they're loud, they're hard to navigate, and a lot of times it's, especially for large events, you're just being told where you're going to go. You don't get to decide it. But maybe for some reason, someone here in this room gets to think about where they're going to be putting their space. What are things you need to remember? ADA compliant does not mean accessible. ADA compliant means that someone can't sue you. That isn't a good experience. I mean, I guess for you, not being sued is a good experience, but that doesn't mean that the person trying to attend your event is having a good experience. You're gonna have to keep in mind everything from, elevators, walkways, ramps, construction you didn't know about showing up outside the building. There's a lot you have to think about, and it can be incredibly overwhelming. So what are things that you should think about when you're setting up your space? Number one, signage. I cannot tell you how many times I've gone into a convention space and not known where the elevator was, and no one else seemed to know where the elevator was, and there were no signs to the elevator. I've also had, actually, for those of you who attended the first GA Conf, we were working with the venue to set up signs to where the sessions were. For the accessibility conference, they pointed the signs at the stairs. You may realize why this could be an issue, and so we had to work with the venue to correct them and be like, no, we need to direct signs towards the elevators because those are important. You're also going to want to keep in mind your spacing. Make sure you have enough room. A lot of times, and I think this goes back to thinking ADA compliant, if you have the standard width walkway, that's going to be okay, but if you have someone who needs a guide or a service dog, they are not going to fit in an ADA compliant entranceway. You have to keep these things in mind. Be sure to offer quiet places. At the beginning of the conference, we said we have a room that's just designated to be quiet. There are going to be moments as Shell was saying, that no one's going to pick up the telephone and they need to take a break. Make sure you offer that. It's really easy to overwhelm people. And you know what? If possible, maybe if you don't have that, maybe at least find some earplugs or something you can hand out. There's just something to think. But you know what? That's not your problem. You're not running the convention center. You're running your booth. Well, good news. I got stuff for you to do too. So, common booth problems. And this is very, very common at so many booths. The number one thing that I see are standing only demos. So there's a screenshot that's being shown that's a standing only demo, and you can kind of see that the screen is actually tilting upwards towards the person who is standing. So you can imagine if you are a person attending this conference using a wheelchair, you are definitely not going to be able to see that screen. You may not even be able to reach the controls. I've also seen the reverse. People make sitting demos, but they have some really cool chair that totally fits their marketing theme and looks like space agey or something. And then it can't be moved. So now there's a demo that's the right height, but someone using a wheelchair can't even get to the demo now. Also, thick carpet. I know people love thick carpet. It's molasses. Again, super hard, especially for people who don't have power assist on their wheelchairs. And the other things that'll happen are you'll go up to a demo and they don't have any headphones. You'll go up there and they will have keyboard and mouse on a game that supports a controller, but not offer the controller, when there are definitely people who can only use one or the other. The other is no accessible line options. We talked at the beginning about how having a separate line from the medical pass for people who sometimes literally can't stand that long because it's too tiring, they have no option other to get in this crazy ass line. Well, that means they're just not going to get in line. They're not going to play. And if that happens enough, why would they come to an event if it's going to be them checking out a bunch of places that they can't engage with? Why would they spend money to do that? And then the other thing I see all the time, I have seen booths make really well-intended, thoughtful accessibility efforts and not put any signs up, so no one knows they're there. If the only way someone can tell you have an accessible setup is to fight to get to that accessible setup, they're never going to know. They're going to leave. Your hard work will be wasted. And that's not even the demo themselves. That's literally just getting to the demo. So there are tons of problems with the demos themselves that you'll see at games. Everything from, although maybe the game has multiple control options or remappable controls, the demo will only have one or limited. Why did you had all this work for multiple control schemes because you knew people were different, but in the demo you didn't put it there. I see a lot of times with VR, there won't be a seated option, or even basic accessibility features in the games that you should probably just have on for the demo, like subtitles, aren't turned on or available in the demo, but they're there in the full game, but they're not there in the demo. What are you actually demoing then? If people are trying to figure out if they'd like their game, your game, and what you're giving to them as a representation of your game doesn't have these things in it, you've probably just lost the customer. And this was actually something that got brought up in the low vision panel, that gamers don't know if they can even play the demo without playing it. So again, if they're going to invest in standing in that line, if they're going to invest in the space, what if they get all the way up there only to find out they can't play it? There's no way for them to know before they get to your demo if they can play with it or not. So if you can think about what's in your demo beforehand, have an info sheet available so that people can look at it while they're waiting, or have a QR code that can be scanned that links to an accessible PDF that a screen reader could read or something like that. Like, just put thought into it. Now, you are having a great time, but you're here for more than games. Maybe you're on a panel, maybe you're talent, maybe you're a journalist. Don't worry, I got you covered too. So, I'm gonna talk about stages, because man, I have been through so many examples of this being terrible. So when you have a stage, I still see a lot of times that people will get their guest list and then not check if any of the people on their guest list have any disability or need some sort of accommodation. If you have a panelist on a wheelchair, you're going to have to make accommodations. You should know who that is. Ramps or elevators are normally a huge problem at conferences. So 3 short stories, all of these happened within the same year. I went to one panel where one of my friends uses a power chair. We told the venue that we had one of the panelists was in a power chair. They're like, yeah, we're gonna set it up. We did not trust them. And luckily, Bryce, wherever he is, got there early to check. And the stage was 2-3 feet high. It's a little hard for a wheelchair to make. So we're like, okay, well, we need a ramp. And they're like, okay. And they were just gonna add the ramp. It was like, whoa, that is super steep. Like, well, you can't do that either. So there was a last minute full tear down of the stage to rebuild it lower so they could add the ramp. Another time, I was on a panel. They had an accessibility ADA lift. Another friend was in a power chair. No one thought to measure the dimensions of the power chair against the lift. We lucked out, but there was less than an inch of clearance for his chair on that lift. Another time, I was on a panel with Sherry, and they provided a lift and literally never tested it before we got there, and it was broken. Like, this is super, super common. It happens all the time. Sorry, I just really needed to get all that rant about. Thank you for entertaining that. All right. The next thing you're gonna need to keep in mind, live captioning and for us today, we've had or previously. Live captioning or interpreters for either the guests who are going to be on your panel or those who are going to be watching it. If you're doing a live stage show and your goal is for people to stand around and watch, people who are hard of hearing or deaf are not going to be able to engage in your content unless you do these things. Something else I see all the time is you're going to have a panel and everyone is in a super high chair except for someone sitting in a wheelchair. That is super awkward. Please think about the seating of your guests when you're doing anything like that. Have chairs where everyone is the same height. And finally, something that gets overlooked a lot is literally mics for guests. There have been a number of times that I've showed up, they're like, okay, we have a hand mic. And I'm like, nope, quadriplegic, they're not gonna hold that. What else you got? There are times people show up with the wrap around your head mic. Again, some people aren't gonna be able to use that. So have a couple lav mics just around because someone's probably gonna need to use it. The last thing that I wanna harp on in this area are lounges. We've talked today about so much stuff, and we've had several of our speakers talk about how they will come and they have like journalist stuff that they also do. They're reviewing, they're interviewing. And how many times have you guys gone to E3 and seen the journalist space is on a staircase on the second floor? Always. It's just always where it is. And so we're excluding journalists and press who have disabilities because they are literally physically unable to get to the spaces where journalists and press are supposed to be. And they all have small doors, tight spaces. Again, all the tables are always super high. And this is just because no one's thinking about it. And why would someone with a disability want to get into games journalism if this is the experience that they have in front of them once they get started? So sorry, I got a little bit negative there. I get it. I get angry, we rant. Let's say you've done all this stuff. You've absorbed every word I've said, and you have made the most accessible goddamn booth in the entire world, and you are so ready. None of that is gonna matter if you don't train your staff. If your staff isn't trained, your good work will not matter. And I can't press this enough. So, things that you're going to need to go over with your staff. Literally the booth setup and the accommodations that you've made. I have worked at booths where we had an accessible setup and I asked someone if they knew about it or how to use it, and they literally didn't know it was there. So if someone had come up to them and asked to use the accessible space, they would have said we don't have one, but we did. You have to make sure your staff is trained. You also want to go through and go through terminology. Language change. There are things that used to be okay to say 20 years ago that are not okay now. Being able to explain the definitions, what words to use, what terminology you want, you need to train your staff, or they're going to unintentionally say something offensive that they didn't mean to say. You're going to want to tell them what a medical pass is and what that allows. And I know I already had a slide separate on medical pass, but I wanted to bring it back up here. So I was at a convention once with the same friend who had the air tanks, and they were going to go into a partner-only lounge space. And with them was their brother who had a medical pass. When they went to enter this booth space, they were told no, that he could not go in because he was not a partner. So he wasn't allowed in, even though he had a medical pass. And so my friend had to choose between I can go into this exclusive area that denotes I'm awesome, risk if I need my air changed that no one will be there, and worst case scenario, I die, or not do that. Obviously, he's not going to go in if he's not going to have the person who's there to medically assist him, especially in case of emergency. So if your staff doesn't know what these things are, it doesn't matter that you've given them out. And it's also really important to just give the event staff a safe place to learn and ask questions, because working with people that you may have not worked with before or are different than you is scary and weird and awkward, and you don't know the right thing to say and you want to ask. So giving your staff a safe place before the event where they can ask their questions that, may come off offensive if they're talking to someone they don't know when they're really well-intentioned is incredibly important. You also need to make sure that you have a contact point person. There will be hiccups in your accessibility journey, especially at an event. So you need someone who is in charge specifically of the accessibility at these events. You need someone that is both accountable for the accessibility of the booth, but also empowered for the accessibility of the booth, so that they have the influence and resources they need to make change, but also if something goes wrong, that they know that they need to improve, right? So it's both sides. And I've seen it so many times that there will be an accessibility problem at a booth and you don't know who to contact. And then 2 weeks later, down the line, you'll be telling the story and someone will be like, oh, but if you'd only called me. I didn't know I was supposed to call you. No one knew I was supposed to call you. You weren't on the contact sheet. Having that person set ahead of time and having that in your staff training is going to be incredibly important. So, in summary, what do you need to remember? Event accessibility starts at registration and planning. Remember it there. Really evaluate, be cognizant and aware of your space, especially during planning. Think about your demo content. What are you highlighting and why? What accessibility features are in there in your main game that would be important to tell the world is there? And above everything else, make sure your staff is ready. Because if you do all that work and your staff isn't aware, it's not going to matter. And with that, I end my rant on event accessibility. Thank you.